All right, my friends, we are waiting
All right,
for
my
the
friends,
stream.
we are waiting
All right, my
for the
friends, we are
stream.
waiting
All right,
for
my
the
friends, we are
stream.
waiting
All right,
for
my
the
friends. Sorry about that. For some reason, Restream is doing this thing where it's pretty silly, where it'll just take you to the live event and then it'll play yourself for yourself. Doesn't make any sense. But let's make sure that we're rocking and rolling. So let me just make sure the stream is working. And it looks like we are online across the board, which is good news. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler, and I am a criminal defense attorney here in Scottsdale, Arizona. We started Watching the Watchers. The name of this program came about because we wanted to hold law enforcement accountable. Prosecutors, politicians, judges, police officers, anybody who's involved in the criminal justice system. We want to make sure that they're getting the same system of justice that you or I would get were we to be going through the system, because we see, unfortunately, there's sometimes different rules for different folks. And so what we want to do today is go through yet another case where a police officer unfortunately shot another individual and that individual died. So yesterday when we were on this program, we talked a little bit about it very, very briefly. We thought that this was something that was brewing, and it looks like this is turning into something that is kind of what we expected, really. It's a situation involving this gentleman right here. His name is Jonathan Pierce. Wait a minute. Let me flip this over. I apologize. Jonathan Pierce here is the individual that we're talking about. Yesterday, we learned that over this past weekend, he was actually shot. He was gunned down by a different officer out of a city called Wolfe City in Texas. And yesterday, when we flagged it, we didn't know much about it. We just knew that there were some postings on Facebook that indicated that this person was, Jonathan Price, was a sort of a hometown hero. And we were trying to learn more about what happened. But now today we know that there's an officer. His name is Shaun David Lucas, who was arrested and actually charged with murder. We learned about that this morning. So today what we're going to do is go through this situation. We're going to go through this case, dive into it a little bit further, and see if we can piece together what is going on. Now, yesterday, this was posted. This was a Facebook post from the attorney that the family has retained to help them through this situation. As a quick refresher, this is what he said. So this was the first information that we got. This guy is Merritt is his name. And he had said that Jonathan Price was a hometown hero, motivational speaker, trainer, professional athlete, community advocate. He was loved by so many. And yesterday, so I think he was talking about Sunday or Saturday night over this past weekend, indicated that there was an assault and he was actually intervening. He told that he raised his hands. He attempted to explain what was going on. Police fired tasers at him. And then when he convulsed from the electrical current, they perceived a threat, quote, and then they shot him to death, which is horrific, right? I mean, that is exactly not what we want happening. And so when we saw that yesterday, we thought, this is not good. And we learn more today. So today we've got a statement from the Department of Public Safety from the Lieutenant Lonnie Haschel. This is from Texas DPS. And keep in mind, when these types of things happen, there are different layers of agencies that are working to do the investigation. So it sounds like the Texas Department of Public Safety or the Texas Rangers, I don't know if those are separate entities or if they're part of the same thing, but this big statewide agency is now getting involved. The officer who was responsible for shooting Jonathan Price, Shaun David Lucas, is a Wolfe City police officer. It's a very small local police department. We're going to tell you a little bit more about that. We did some very preliminary research there as well, tell you what that looked like. And so you've got that Wolfe City police department. You've probably got county police that will, patrol the county like a county sheriff. And then you also have this big statewide agency, which in this case is the Texas Department of Public Safety. And so they released a public statement. And here is what they have to say. They said that approximately at 8:24 p.m. October 3rd, Wolfe City police officer Shaun Lucas responded to a disturbance call at 100 block of Santa Fe Street. So we have this street. We're going to walk you through what it looks like for a possible fight in progress. Officer Lucas made contact with a man later identified as 31-year-old Jonathan Price, who was reportedly involved in the disturbance. Officer Lucas attempted to detain Price, who resisted in a non-threatening posture and began walking away. Officer Lucas deployed his taser, followed by discharging his service weapon, striking Price. EMS was notified. Price was transported to Hunt Hospital, where he later died. Preliminary investigation indicates that the actions of Officer Lucas were, this is where it comes into play, the objectively reasonable. I think what he means is objectively reasonable. objectionably is, I think, the wrong word there, objectively reasonable, meaning that if anybody was in this officer's position, they would have everybody would have agreed that what this officer did was not reasonable. The Texas Rangers have charged Officer Lucas with the offense of murder, booked him into Hunt County Jail. Investigation is being conducted by the Texas Rangers with the cooperation of the Wolfe City Police Department, Hunt County District Attorney's Office. No additional information is being released at this time. So that is, obviously, not a particularly informative statement. We learned a little bit about it. We're able to identify where this occurred, who was involved. We've got Officer Lucas. We know what happened. So that statement matches what Lee Merritt, the family attorney, said. So we now know that there was a taser discharged before the weapon was discharged. He was actually transported to the hospital and he died. Cops later, probably reviewed the body camera footage or whatever footage they found and then decided that this was totally unreasonable and objectively unreasonable, I think, is what they were getting out there. So, this is something that sounds really bad. In a case like this where you have basically an immediate arrest, it's one of two things. One, it's the police department trying to be, hyper proactive. They want to, it's kind of a political arrest. They want to stem any potential riots or protests or any, public unrest. And so they make an arrest immediately just to sort of quell the outrage. They want to, process this thing through, calm everybody down, say, yep, charges are being filed. We're just going to follow this along. Then, a couple of years later, once the case has been pending for, on and off for a year, 18 months, then they'll turn around and they'll say, well, we're going to give this cop a, highly reduced, substantially better plea deal and close the case that way. But that puts some distance between the outrage and the resolution of the case. So that's one potential resolution. The other thing that we could be looking at is that this is a really bad case, right? It's just very bad. Didn't even take any time to investigate. Think about all of these other investigations. Think about how long they have taken. Remember the Ahmaud Arbery case? That case took like 6 months. It was getting kicked around from multiple different prosecutors. Multiple people were involved, and then we finally learned about it 6 months after it happened. This is happening like 3 days after it happened. So it could be that this is just very, very bad, very obvious, something more analogous to, to murder. Like there's no, explanation for any use of force. There's no even reasonable basis for the officer discharging his firearm. There's not even any good arguments, which would make this very, very bad. It sounds bad. It sounds like Jonathan Price was somebody to be admired, somebody who, stood for a lot of things, did a lot in his community. And so when you see somebody like that getting gunned down by the police, it's hard to suddenly jump to the conclusion that this was somebody who had a problem with the police. So actually, we have a message from him that he posted on Facebook that we're going to read here in a little bit. But it's hard to jump to the conclusion. Everybody always likes to say, well, let's wait for more facts. Let's wait for the evidence. We talk about Jacob Blake. Here was a knife in the car that they found 4 days later that they didn't tell us about, whatever, right? There's some justification for it, but it's hard to find that in a situation where you have somebody who is, so seemingly heroic for the local community. And it seems like that's what we have here. We have another story from an actual local affiliate of CBS in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And they have a quote here from the family attorney again. They're saying that the circumstances surrounding Lucas's investigation, or the ultimate decision to use deadly force, is now under investigation. Price's father, Junior Price, spoke about that alleged deadly choice too on Monday, saying, I want to see what the man gets, what he has coming to him for killing my son. And that's part of what we do here. We also want to see what he gets. That's why we are watching The Watchers. Monday afternoon, Price's family said there is video proof that the shooting was a criminal act and they want justice. So this is what we all want to see. Apparently, the chief saw the video and told me he wasn't happy with what he saw, and that's why they charged him. So the Texas Rangers are now responsible for investigating the shooting, and they posted the statement that essentially we already covered here, saying that the investigation is ongoing and there's not going to be releasing any more information. So I'll be very curious to see if this footage is leaked or publicly released, or comes to our attention one way or the other, because it sounds like that is going to be not good. It's going to be bad. And the question will be, what we're gonna get into this analysis, but is there potential surveillance footage that exists? Is this going to be body camera footage? Is this going to be civilian cell phone footage. Fortunately, most people now, when the cops show up, everybody's got their cell phone out. It's amazing that they do that, holds them accountable. So that may be what we're talking about here. Now let's go back and let's learn a little bit more about this officer, shall we? His name is Shaun David Lucas, and this is what he looks like here. So he was arrested this morning. He was booked into a number of different jails, and we've actually had a difficult time trying to find this guy. Typically when somebody is arrested, it can be a little bit hard to find where they land because you're trying to track down which different agency actually found the guy and then where they're transferring him to. So this happened in Hunt County. He was transferred over to Rockwall County, and then my understanding is he was transferred over to a different county, and he's still sort of getting bounced around a little bit. And so this is him. This is Shaun David Lucas. He was with the Wolfe City Police Department. He's been charged with murder. Bond was set at $1 million, but apparently somebody has already posted that. We're going to show you that. And he was transferred to Rockwall, but I don't think he's there anymore. I think he has now gone to a different facility because we've been trying to track him down. A couple things to note, right? If you're going to be looking him up or looking up any criminal history of him, a lot of this stuff is public record. He actually does have some records that you can go find just right on public access. You don't need to be a lawyer. You don't need to be, any special police, law enforcement agency or any of those things. You can go find what I'm about to show you just on public record. So there's nothing, nothing privileged, nothing private here. You're free to go check this stuff out. A couple things to note. Shaun David Lucas is 22 years old. He was born in 1998, 22-year-old guy. Obviously young, inexperienced, probably has only been on the force for a year, maybe 2 years. Because you can't typically get on there until you're 21 or older. So he's just brand new to the force, totally inexperienced, probably have never been in a situation like this. He's in Wolfe City. So let's frame some context around him. I'm not trying to excuse anything that he did or anything that happened here. Let's just provide some context. Very young guy. And quite frankly, is not the most law-abiding person in general. So let's take a look at his criminal record or his record just from a couple places that we were able to find in Texas, because we all know that if the media has an opportunity to find anything about Jonathan Price, they're going to do that, right? There's going to be a lot of people. Everybody likes to drag the people who are killed by the cops, their records through the mud. We want to know every single traffic ticket, every single criminal infraction for Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and Jacob Blake and George Floyd and all of them, Daniel Prude, everyone that we've covered, the media, everybody goes crazy. Yeah, well, he's dead, but he was a criminal. It's totally irrelevant in my mind. But when we're talking about police officers, these are people who are supposed to be law abiding. They're supposed to be enforcing the law. And so when you see a cop that has a lot of criminal record or criminal background, that's sort of what they're supposed to be preventing and avoiding and enforcing in society. So when they have it, it's a little bit of a red flag. And when somebody with that red flag gets hired onto the police department, that's concerning. That is a policy problem. It's a procedure problem. They shouldn't be, letting people like that onto the force, in my mind. Now, this is not a particularly egregious violations from Shaun David Lucas, not by any stretch of the imagination. It's all traffic related stuff. So it's, not particularly interesting, but it is important to point out. So let's take a look at what he has going on, because there's some interesting things we can glean from it. So this is from the state of Texas versus Shaun David Lucas, and this is a traffic violation. So I pulled this from, I think this was out of Hunt, from Hunt County court records, and this was section TC 545.352. It's a misdemeanor traffic. Apparently in Texas, traffic tickets are considered criminal tickets, and so he took a plea deal in, June 19, 2019. So he took a plea, pled guilty or pled no contest to speeding, 10% more or above the posted limit. Judicial Officer Sheila Linden, right? So this is kind of a standard criminal speeding ticket criminal speeding ticket filed early in 2019, and it has been disposed of. Now, if you pull this up and you scroll down a little bit on the actual court records, you're going to see this interesting evolution of case activity. And so when we start back when this originally was initiated, so the charge was filed on January 4th, and he must have had an appearance date on February 1st, right? So it gets filed in the court system. Then he has to appear nearly a month later, which is pretty standard. And then he didn't show up to court because he got a second appearance date. So they just automatically continued that court date. They bumped it out. They said, hey, we're going to give you a second appearance. So, you didn't come the first time, but we're going to let you come back a second time. Then they must have continued that second court date out till sometime in April. Then when he did not go to court in April, they issued a warrant. Then they sent it over to collections. Omni must be their sort of internal people failure to appear. They don't show up to court. Internal system. Again, I don't practice law in Texas, so we're just sort of speculating based on what we know how Arizona works, and sent to Omni, and then eventually he makes some contact with the court 6 months later, and then he gets the warrant cleared and the warrant recalled. So, that happens. People miss their court dates all the time. Not getting too hard on him for that. People do miss your court dates. You misplace paperwork. But in this case, something could have happened. He could have just willfully ignored the court date. He could have just said, I'm not going to that stupid ticket, whatever, and figured, the court would deal with it. Or he could have legitimately not received notice of it, or, could have been sent to an old address, an old residence, to his parents' address, something like that. So, not excusing it, but it does show that he's not particularly in compliance with the law, at least as it relates to traffic offenses. Had a warrant issued, missed court date a couple times. Those are called failures to appear. It's not good. And it is pretty, it's the same guy. And so Shaun David Lucas, yeah, exact same guy. And he's got more of a history here as well. It's not just a one-off incident. So here is some other traffic violations that he got in a different county. So this is over in Rockwall County, which is just around the corner. First one is for speeding, if you pull this up. So he got that one dismissed. Second one was violating a license restriction. So this may have been something, he was in 2016, I think he would have only been 17 or just maybe 18 or right around that age, where you're not allowed to drive after curfew. Or it could have been a violation for not wearing his glasses or something like that. But he has a violation for restrictive driver's license. He wasn't following the restrictions on his license. And then this last one is another speeding ticket. So 2016 speeding, violation of a restrictive covenant on your driver's license, and then another traffic violation that was later dismissed. So a little bit of a speeding problem. This is a problem for many officers. Most officers do not want anything on their record because they're going to be entrusted with government property, right? Police vehicles, deadly weapons, all sorts of evidence and all these things. So you want to make sure that they're in compliance with the law, and speeding and a safe driving record and a clean motor vehicle history are pretty critical to becoming an officer. So it'll be curious, to know what happened there. Did they know about this stuff? Did he not tell them about it? Did they not do a background check? Because Wolfe City is so small, I think it's less than 1,500 people. Maybe he just got the job because he wanted it, and that's what happens in small towns. Hey, Shaun's looking for a job. You want to be a cop? Sure, come on over. He can be a cop. And they put him through the academy or whatever. I don't know how it works there, but it is a very, very small town, and so we're going to talk about that. What does Wolfe City look like? Wolfe City is about 70 miles northeast of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So if you plot it on a map, you're going to see Dallas is here, and this tiny little town called Wolfe City is in Hunt County out here, and it's almost zero people are out there, right? Not a lot of people. When you zoom in a little bit, this is what the Wolfe City, when you actually want to know what the city boundaries look like, this is the Wolfe City. This is the city. This is Wolfe City. You've got a little bit of a lake here. You've got, a couple blocks here, 1,500 people. We've got a dollar store. We've got a high school. We've got a middle school. We've got a cemetery over here. That's it. That is the town, right? It's not big. And that's curious. Okay. If the town is so small, and if Jonathan Price is a hometown hero, and if Shaun, the police officer, Shaun Lucas, is a small town cop, do these people know each other? Have they crossed paths before? Do they know who who the other person is? That'll be interesting to know as this continues to develop. So this is a city of Wolfe, a picture of Wolfe City entrance. So when you come into the town, this is what you see: Wolfe City, caring folk, industry, and country living. And the reason I wanted to crop these pictures is just to show you sort of what we're dealing with. So this entire altercation took place in an environment that looked just like this. In fact, it looked like this. This is where it actually happened. So this is Santa Fe Street, and we have right here that mile marker. It's about 100 block of Santa Fe Street. And so presumably this is where it happened. This is where the cops said in their report, in their public release statement, that this all took place. And so we're gonna sort of look at this from a couple different angles. But before we do, let's take a look at what the Wolfe City Police Department looks like. All right, so remember I told you how little Wolfe City is. It's about 1,500 people. I think there's a lot of people who are passing through there as they're going to the other big metropolises. And so what we're talking about with the Wolfe County Police Department, from what I can gather, is a police department that literally has like 3 people on it. Okay, this is a screenshot from their website, and so you can see here, you can find their mailing address right in Wolfe City. You can see, send them an email, give them a phone call if you want to. It's the local police department, serves Wolfe City surrounding areas. They strive to provide their best each and every day. Right? They'll grab a snake from the front yard. They're ready to come serve you. The police chief, we've got Matthew Martin. Sergeant, who's also listed here, is Jared Hayes, but we have an officer also, right? Shaun David Lucas. So from what I'm looking at, it looks like this is it. We have one officer on who is an officer, right? This is their officer. This is their police department. So it's important, I think, to keep that in context, that we're not dealing with a really big police agency. A big police agency has a lot of problems with it. We have a lot of cover up. We've got a lot of cultural, institutional problems in these big agencies, right? When you think of NYPD, LAPD, the Phoenix PD, we think of this just a lot of corruption, a lot of cultural problems, a lot of issues. Same type of thing can happen in these smaller departments too, but in a different degree, in a different extent, because now you've got these officers who are buddies. They hang out every day, and there's a lot of concern about officers manipulating evidence or doing things that could jeopardize the integrity of the investigation. Remember when we were talking about the Breonna Taylor case, when the officers were going into her residence after this whole interaction happened at Breonna Taylor's residence? The other officers were there, and they said, you cannot go in there. So Detective Hankinson, you can't go in there unless you have an escort, because we want to make sure that you're being held accountable. We want to make sure that you're not just going in there and touching whatever you want and manipulating things. And so, you've got an agency like that has a big, a lot of people, a lot of personnel. They've got an entire team and system of people who are set up to go and respond to these types of shootings. In this case, we're dealing with like 3 guys. Okay, so once the shooting takes place, he gets picked up by an ambulance and transported. He dies at the hospital, Jonathan Price. And then these other agencies are coming in, and so we're dealing with a lot of cooks in the kitchen. We're dealing with the Texas Rangers, their public safety. We're dealing with county police, county prosecutors, city police, city prosecutors. So everybody's kind of converging onto this little town right now. And the individual, Shaun David Lucas, who's responsible for shooting Jonathan Price, is also being carted around to different places. So he's been transferred. I think he went originally into the Hunt jail, then he got moved over to Rockwall, then he bounced over to somewhere else. And so it's all a little bit chaotic today, but we're going to continue to learn more as it unfolds. And as we look around at the sort of the rest of the scene, we can see here that this, I think, is where we're talking about the incident occurring. So this was the 100 block of Santa Fe Boulevard, so right around here. And when we were listening to or reading the screenshot from the Facebook post, they were talking about this taking place at a gas station. And this is about the closest thing to a gas station that we can see. This is a car wash, essentially, right? This is where you pull your car in and you spray it down. Maybe gas here. It looks like a water thing to me. Maybe there's gas. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I poked around this area. This was the closest thing that I could see to a gas station, and that may be what they're talking about. This over here is a chapel. So this is a separate building that it's got a sign for a chapel, and there's not much else around here. When we look here, you're going to see there's another residence over here. There's a residence right here, and this is the actual parking lot and the car wash area, right? So cars drive through here, they get their car wash. You can see somebody, when this was taken, just did that. They just drove in, and that's the streak leaving the car wash. So this is where allegedly it occurred. We've got the chapel here. We've got 2 residences here. Pretty good distance between here. There's a wall blocking this angle. There's a wall blocking this angle. There's a lot of demoed stuff over in this bottom left. And there's some industrial stuff. But my point is, all of these different arrows are showing you that there may not be, much to see in terms of surveillance footage. We may not see anything pointing this direction from this house or from this house. Or if it is pointing from this house, there is a big wall in the way, so it's going to be hard to see. So I'm sure the chapel doesn't have any particularly, high-tech surveillance pointing this direction. So there may be some stuff at the car wash, or this may be civilian type footage. We're going to have to continue to wait and see. And so that will come out. Now, I wanted to also show you this little clip of a map showing you sort of the distance between this area, all of these different areas. So when I started looking at this, I live in Scottsdale. I live in a city that's one of the biggest cities in the country. I think Arizona, Phoenix, the Phoenix metro area is now, I think, the 5th biggest in the country. But most of the country is not like that. Most of us are not living in big cities. We're all spread out. And so when we're thinking about this in those terms, we're used to seeing the imagery. We're used to seeing, huge agencies of police with 50,000 employees and, just SWAT teams and helicopters and all that stuff. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about very small towns where there's a lot of distance between people, but there's not a lot of people. So everybody kind of knows everyone else. And so when we were looking through Shaun Lucas, when we were looking through his record, we were able to find out where he lives. And I'm not going to actually post his address. I don't want, any of that doxing stuff or any of those claims to be made, but he's pretty close by to Wolfe City. You would expect that if he was living, if he's working in Wolfe City, that he'd be living close by, and he is. He's about 46 minutes away. So this is the actual, driving distance from his residence, which is where he lives. So if he passes through Greenville and drives up to Wolfe City, he's about 46 minutes out from point to point. And so he lives in this location and he works up in this location. So he's pretty close. The only town that he really passes through is Greenville. And again, if this is a situation where there's 1,500 people and you have a hometown hero and you have one of 3 cops that really govern the whole city, is there a strong likelihood that these two know each other or knew of each other? Was there anything, brewing in their past that maybe could have exacerbated this situation? I don't know, but it is curious. It's something a little bit different than what we're used to seeing. In George Floyd's case, we were in a huge city or big city with a ton of cops, and there was some indication that they knew each other. That Derek Chauvin and George Floyd had run into each other in previous encounters. So we'll be curious. We'll see what happens with that. Now, as I said, we have been trying to really pin down where Shaun David Lucas is, and it has not been easy to find him. We checked a number of different jails. So we've checked in Hopkins County Jail, Hunt County Jail, Rockwall County Jail. We checked the Texas Rangers. We checked they have a system in Texas that allows you to go through and search for criminal history going back to a million years. We did a search on there, couldn't find anything yet. So he's still in processing. Not unusual. This is something that happens all the time in criminal cases. It happens even with our own clients. If somebody's under investigation and they get arrested, it can be really difficult to go find them because the cops are all sort of in this, I don't know. And as long as they're following the rules, as long as they're transporting this officer in front of a judge within the prescribed time, and as long as he's, none of his constitutional rights have been violated or any of those things, then it's all fair game. But it also sounds like he's not even in custody anymore, which is why we're not able to find him. But we're still not even able to find the court records. So is really my point. From the jails to the court records to the case file, where are the charges? What is he specifically being charged with? What is the probable cause statement? Who is the county attorney? Is it a city, county? Is it a state? Texas Ranger type of attorney, who's representing the government is really what we're asking. We want to know who's going to be handling the investigation so that we can hold them accountable, right? We certainly don't want this to be done in Wolfe City, where the city prosecutor is probably, best friends with all of these people. So we're trying to figure that out, and it's not unusual for this to take about 48 hours for it to get settled, because I'm sure this is a bit chaotic over there in Texas at the moment. Now, We were able to find this somewhere. Miss Faith back there, who does an amazing job, found this somewhere, and we indicate, or this indicates, from Smash, the topic, that this is, he was booked today or yesterday. Texas Rangers. He's got a stub of an address, charged for murder, and he had a $1 million cash or surety bond, and he was actually released to the other agency. So there's been some indication that he has in fact posted bond, but I haven't confirmed that anywhere. I haven't seen that on court records anywhere yet. Doesn't mean that he hasn't done it yet, but it would also be curious to know whether or not whether he was actually bonded out, meaning he paid the full $1 million, or he just posted a 10% of that full amount. So I don't know how Texas works with their bonds, but we're going to look into that as soon as we find out where he is. Once we know where he is, specifically who's handling his case, what court's it in, then we're going to be able to pin down all of the other details. But as it stands right now, it's just a lot of speculation going around. So we'll see where that leads. We've got the Texas murder statute right here. Texas murder statute is pretty easy to read. It says murder section 19.02. It defines these two terms, adequate cause and sudden passion. So we know what those mean, but they're not really relevant unless you fall within this category, unless you fall during the punishment stage down here in subsection D. So really what we're talking about is subsection B here. A person commits an offense if he intentionally or knowingly causes the death of an individual. So that would be like intentional murder. Or 2, intends to cause serious bodily injury and commits an act clearly dangerous to human life that causes the death of an individual. So, that would be like, well, I'm only going to shoot you in the leg. Well, you shoot them in the leg, you hit their artery, and they bleed out. Okay, well, you only intended to cause seriously bodily injury, but you shot a gun at somebody and they died. So that's what that subsection is for. And then part 3 is committing a felony. So if you commit a felony and somebody dies as the result of the commission of that felony, then you can be charged with murder for that. So that's not applicable in this situation either. Really what we're talking about is subsection, or is 1902 B1 and B2. Probably B1 is what he'll end up being charged with, intentionally or knowingly causing the death of an individual. And so that is going to be intentional murder. They're going to charge him with that, it sounds like, based on what we've gathered thus far. So then it will be up to him and his defense team, and hopefully not, but the prosecutor's office, like we've seen a lot of issues with Daniel Cameron out of Kentucky and all these different places where they almost get these police get like an assist from the prosecutors. So we want to make sure that doesn't happen. So we'll be following that along as well. And we've got a couple other things we want to discuss before we get over to the chat. It's going to be a little bit of a short day today in terms of the show, because I have another meeting I have to get to shortly. But continuing developments, we just got this statement from the Hunt County District Attorney's Office, and this was regarding the arrest. He said that Lucas is charged with murder following the death of Jonathan Price, and his statement comes through here. It says, in regards to the officer shooting in Wolfe City, Texas, on October 3rd, the Hunt County District Attorney's Office is in contact with the Texas Rangers and is aware of the arrest of Shaun Lucas for the offense of murder. Though an arrest has been made, our office has not received the case from the Texas Rangers, as it remains an active and ongoing investigation. So it sounds like just as of this afternoon, the Texas Rangers still have it. Hasn't formally been sent over to a prosecutor yet. As is customary, this case will be filed with our office once the investigation is complete. We'll see when that is. Until then, the thorough work of the Texas Rangers and others will continue. Our office will evaluate the case and present it to the Hunt County Grand Jury upon completion of the investigation. Based on the ongoing status of the investigation, we will not comment on the facts of the case at this time. So, very used to that statement, blanket statement, not going to comment on the facts until the investigation is concluded. And so this is very curious, okay, because we're going to see how long this all takes. We know that an arrest was made. Sounds like he may have posted bond, so he may be out, but maybe not. That hasn't been confirmed yet. And they haven't even filed the paperwork with the prosecutor's office, which is, should be getting done right about now. If that stuff has not been filed by tomorrow, by basically this time tomorrow, That's going to be interesting. It means, they're really sort of extending this investigation period. They made an arrest. The chief of police saw some video footage, didn't like what he saw, said that an arrest needed to be made. Now it goes over to the Texas Rangers. They're going to do their investigation. Then they should probably conclude pretty quickly, if they're watching the same videos that the sheriff was watching, they should come to the same conclusion, turn that right over to the county attorney's office, and the county attorney's office impanels a grand jury and it moves forward. Now, again, this is a really small town, so I don't know how often they do this stuff. How often does Hunt County have grand jury proceedings? I don't know. Is it once a month? Is it less than that, more than that? I don't know. So we'll figure that out, obviously, once we know where this stuff is coming in. So if you have not already done so, hit that subscribe button, because this is going to be a story that will, of course, continue on. One other thing that we wanted to mention before we jump into the chat is there was a post that came from Jonathan Price that is a little strange. He posted this on Facebook in must have been this year, June 15th of this year. He posted this, kind of a weird statement, but relevant. And so we can go through it and we can take it for what it's worth here. But this is what he posted on Facebook. With all the tension and animosity going on with race and the police, I'm on the fence as Lil Wayne, with him saying a white cop saved his life. And it hasn't been too vocal based off experiences. Brain emoji. And so, it's kind of a sort of a mixed message. I'm not sure what his point is. I tried to read through it. I was raised in Malones and Woodruffs in my hometown. Second family then. The amount of food they fed to me, they spent me, outweighs any BS about race or color right now. I have a family that's never done a damn thing for me or supported my business ventures, and they're my blood. Sad, they will forever be a million in my book. They know who they are. They're to blame for my countryside and addiction to white women. Not complaining one bit. There were times I could have been detained for speeding, outstanding citizens, outdated registration, dozing off at red lights before making it to my garage downtown after a long day. I passed sobriety tests. By 2 Texas white cops, they let me drive to where I was headed. And by the way, they consider Wiley, Texas to be very racist. I've never got that kind of energy from the popo. Not saying black lives don't matter, but don't forget about your own or your experiences through growth and waking up, which is a very interesting statement. Sounds like he's, sort of leaning with the police, leaning with how they are doing their job instead of siding so much with BLM. Now, again, a little bit of a weird statement. It's kind of mixed and chopped together, and I'm not sure, there's much we can take away from that other than this is going to be a complicated case. I think. And we have indication that something else interesting happened. Now, again, I'm not a Texas attorney, and so I'm trying to figure out what's going on. But there's a lot of stuff that's flying around. And I'd actually have this question for Texas attorneys. But we were at the end able to find a filing out of Hunt County. So if you go to the Hunt County website and you look up this case in particular, you'll see this. It says that there was a writ of habeas corpus that was filed today. It was filed in Shaun Lucas's case. There was a writ 11132 filed literally today for Shaun David Lucas, the same guy, with Judicial Officer Andrew Bench. So a writ of habeas corpus was filed in the 196th District Court, which is interesting. I don't know specifically what this means in Texas. Could mean a couple things, right? It could be local procedure, and I'm just speculating that they call your initial court date, your initial appearance, a writ, right? A writ of habeas corpus. They could call it that. It could be just a local procedure that they call, because it doesn't make sense that they would file a writ of habeas corpus in the 196th District Court in Texas. Or maybe it does. Maybe they accept civil filings. But anyways, I'm sort of rambling. A writ of habeas corpus is the same thing that the attorneys in Kyle Rittenhouse's case filed, right? They're filing a civil claim against the government saying that you're being held illegally, or you're being detained without due process. They need to let you out. It's not a criminal portion of the case, not criminal procedure, it's civil procedure, and you're filing a complaint to get somebody out of custody. So So I don't know. Did somebody actually file this? We don't know yet because we can't see a lot of the records, but it is interesting. Either this is local procedure in Texas, they just call your first court appearance, something like that. Haven't heard of that before. Or somebody really did file a writ of habeas corpus, which got done very quickly. It was filed today. So we're going to learn more about this. Again, we need a lot of this to settle down and see specifically what is happening where. So let's get those questions going. I'm going to hop on over to the live chat. I got about 10, 12 minutes to hop on and do that. And I know there's going to be a lot of questions about that, specifically about Jonathan Price. Any questions about Jonathan Price or anything else? Let's turn it on over here on the live stream. And hello, everybody. All right. So we've got... Isn't a habeas corpus attorney specific? I thought it was like malpractice for lawyers. It is. It traditionally is a really specific attorney. You need somebody who's good at that, who specializes in that area in order to do a good job with that. And so I'm curious as to why that has been filed so quickly. Traditionally, what you would call that initial court date would be an arraignment or an initial appearance, or it'd be something along those lines. Here, a writ of habeas corpus is not something that I've seen as an initial court date. So it sounds like somebody did file something. And if somebody did file something and he did already post either $1 million or 10% of that as a down payment bond, then he may have some really heavy hitters behind him. Okay, let's see here. What are your views on bail bonds and bail enforcement? Important part of our justice system are unfair to minorities and the poor. It's a great question. Huge topic on that. But yeah, I really do think that there are a lot of people who just get hosed by these bonds. Literally, I've seen people in custody because they couldn't post a $500 bond, right? Sitting in custody for really essentially minor offenses, but they can't post $500. They don't know who to call. They don't even know how to navigate the system. They don't know. Some people don't even know that they can post a bond to get out of custody. So you have a lot of people who are just sort of forgotten about and just floating through the criminal justice system. It's a really sad thing. And I think that there's a lot that we could do to reform that. Auditing America says, hey, how do we get the police to wear body cams and make them show everything they have? Well, that's a political thing. We just have to tell the politicians to do it. And if they need some money, all right, we got to bite the bullet and mandate every one of these cops now wears a body camera. And I would like to see all of this stuff essentially publicly available, right? I can go and find public records about almost anything anywhere because of our public records and open meetings and all these different, transparency laws. There's a lot of this that should be accessible by the public because nobody's watching the body camera footage. Nobody. We've had cases where we've represented people where we've told the prosecutor, I have personally told the prosecutor, hey, I watched the body camera footage for my client. This case is insane. You just need to watch it. If you just watch it, you're going to agree with me and you're going to dismiss the case. And they'll get an email. They'll write an email back and they'll say, reviewed the file. No deviation request will be granted. And you just go, you know what? I bet they didn't even watch it. And there was one time, there's actually multiple times where I would literally take my Surface or whatever tablet or laptop I had on me, and I would cue the video file up, the body camera footage from the government's own file, and I would say, listen, you're going to watch this. I know you didn't. I'm going to show you this. Ready? Press play. And play it for them, and then they'll see it. And you'll say, listen, I'm going to show this right to the jury, to the judge. Do you want to move forward with this? And they'll say, you're right. That shouldn't have happened. Cops shouldn't have done that. And they'll just turn around and dismiss the charges. But that's because I looked at it. That's because you had somebody who cared enough to look. So you can have all of these body camera proceedings or all these recordings taking place, but if nobody's watching them, then a lot of this same malfeasance, I think, is going to go on. So I would like to see a lot of that stuff publicly available. And I don't see why it shouldn't be. We should be able to have, we've got incredible ability to capture data and evidence, and we can see all of this stuff almost in real time. Don't know why we're not utilizing that technology. Okay, a couple other questions. Let's see. Every camera counts. They are now blurring the body cam here in Arizona. When does the body camera come out? Don't know. We're going to be following along on that. We've had some real bad experiences letting out violent offenders on cashless bond. I'm sure that's the case. I'm sure that happens. There's no question about it. And I don't know that justifies a blanket policy. I think that we could, make some sensible revisions to what we're currently doing, and less people will be in custody who don't need to be in custody. More of the people who do need to be in custody will stay in custody. But a blanket one size fits all rule, I don't think has served us well. What would it take to use that as the main piece of evidence? Because I know that evidence is ranked. So Auditing America asked that question. So the main piece of evidence, it's such a broad question. It's hard to answer that specifically, but we're always evaluating evidence. And so we'll typically what you do. So like when you go to law school and you're in trial practice, they'll tell you to simply make a chart. This is good. This is bad. These are our good facts. These are the bad facts. These are the good evidence. This is the good evidence. This is the bad evidence. These are the good witnesses. These are the bad witnesses. And you get all of your data organized in these different charts. And then you start to see your case in this bigger bird's eye view picture. You can see everything together. And then you can start to come up with your theme of your case. And you can say, okay, we're going to use these good facts, these good witnesses, this good evidence, this good body camera footage. And the story is whatever the theme is going to be. So body cameras can come in, body cameras may not come in. It just depends on how you want to go with your case. Okay, other questions. Are there any dangers or concerns with immediately releasing body camera footage to the general public right after an event? And so JW asked that question. I think it's a great question. And in my mind, I think that the original justification for withholding the body camera footage is no longer applicable. So it used to be that we wanted to prevent sort of chaos or outrage. We wanted to protect the integrity of the investigation. We wanted to protect the integrity of the police department, want to protect these officers and so on. And I understand that argument. I totally disagree with it, but I get it. I understand why they're saying that. But now what we're seeing is that not releasing the body camera footage is causing significantly more harm than good. And this was one of my biggest criticisms of the Jacob Blake case. Jacob Blake, if you don't remember, that was the guy who was running around the car, and he goes into the car and the officer shot him 7 times in the back. I got a lot of grief over that case, but what I was asking for specifically is that the police, they didn't have any body camera footage. They didn't have any body cameras. If they would have, we would have been able to see all of that right away. And if they would have had body cameras, they could have disclosed that to us right away, and it would have calmed the nerves of everybody. We all could have easily just said, yeah, look, he had a knife. It's right on the body camera footage. That cop's shooting is 100% justified. But because there was no body camera footage, because we have no evidence of it, there were riots for days, millions and millions of dollars of property damage. Things were mayhem for a long period of time. And we want to avoid that. So now in my mind, I think there should be rapid response teams as part of the police department. We had an officer involved shooting. Okay, cool. Within 24 hours, we're going to have the body camera footage. We're going to have everything that you need. We're going to, what does the public want? You want criminal records. You want personnel files from the officers. You want all of the data. You want his last performance review. You want to see what trainings he took about cultural sensitivity or whatever you want, public. We'll give all of that to you in the next 24 hours. That's our commitment to transparency and accountability. I think can you ask for anything more than that? And honestly, how hard would it be for them to just incorporate that into their HR policies, part of their team? Why don't they do that? Well, we can go on a different tangent on that, but I can talk to you all about police unions and politicians and a lot of other things. But I would like to see the body cameras released immediately. All right, let's see if there's any other questions. I'm glad to hear you have a common sense approach to bail bonds. I work in that industry and see the good and the bad, but I do think bail enforcement does a great job of holding defendants accountable. Yeah, I would agree with that. We've seen cases where it's sort of been a good thing that they've been on a tight leash. Okay, and there's some situations where that's even recommended. If we have a situation where there's a client who has a drug problem, maybe putting him on drug monitoring is a good thing to keep that leash pretty tight so that there's no likelihood to reoffend. And so I think that's where your point was going. GG says, hey, body cameras help everyone who deserves to be helped, good cops and good citizens. The only people it hurts, bad cops and criminals. I agree with that. I don't think in today's age that there's any reason why we should still have that. Butt Naked Gamer. Should I become a lawyer? I am 27 and sick of being self-employed. So, I absolutely love what I do. I love this space. I love the ability that the freedom that I have to be creative. I love to help people. I love to, just be passionate and advocate for good people. And it's part of my personality. And so I think if you're of that mindset or of that disposition, then law school is a good fit for you. I will tell you that when I was going through law school, there were a lot of people who were going through law school who just also got sick of being employed and they didn't like their current job. And their only reason for them wanting to go to law school is because I don't know what else to do. It sounds good. 3 years, kicking around case law and hanging out. Sounds pretty good to a lot of people, but a lot of those people who have, who were of that mindset have sort of flamed out, and now they're stuck with big student loans and they're not happy anyways. So if you're doing it for the right reasons, then great. If you're looking for a gig because you're bored and you don't know what else to do, I don't think that's the right answer. I'd stay away from that. Don't you think police wearing and utilizing body cams would guarantee for both parties? Don't you think that police unions, along with civilians, should support it? I would agree with that. I mean, if I were a police officer and I was doing everything by the book and I was confident in what I was doing, I would say, body cam me up, suit me up. Let me go out and just, enforce the law and be a good, upstanding police officer. Camera me up. And I'd have no problem with it, personally. All right, a couple other questions. Money for settlement should exhaust the cop's pension prior to using taxpayer dollars. So that's an interesting thing, right? Is we talk about this concept of having skin in the game. There's a book by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. It's called Skin in the Game. Great book. It talks about, a lot of these people in our society are making decisions for us, but they don't ultimately have any skin in the game. Okay, think about our Congress people, right, who passed healthcare for all of us, but they keep their congressional healthcare plan. Right? They don't have any skin in the game of our healthcare. If our healthcare is terrible, we pass whatever we want, whatever they think we need, and it's not any good, it doesn't affect them. So they don't have any skin in the game. Same with a lot of these officers, in my opinion. If they do something wrong and they're going to be protected by their unions, they're going to be protected by the prosecutors who just refuse to prosecute them. Or if they do a really half-assed job like we saw in Kentucky with Daniel Cameron. They're protected by the judges. They're protected by the politicians. They have no skin in the game. You can't even get a lot of information about these guys. You can't even disclose their personnel files because the laws are all just protecting them. So if they had something to lose, if they lost some money, if they lost their freedom, if they lost their qualified immunity, and we said, hey, yeah, the taxpayers aren't going to pay out $12 million, Breonna Taylor, but the cop who's responsible for that damage, they're going to be liable for that. That's skin in the game. And I think that would help correct a little bit of the imbalance there. Pete Pan says, shouldn't police unions be stripped of their unchecked power to manipulate evidence? Cops are not even required to give a statement for 48 hours or something like that after a shooting. So, police unions across the country are all different. I don't know, specifically that they manipulate evidence or that they do things like that. But I can tell you that they're responsible for negotiating a lot of the contracts that makes a lot of the evidence more difficult to get. And so we see this, we saw this specifically here in Phoenix. Basically, the police union had negotiated terms with the city council that said that every 5 years or so, we're just going to wipe the slate clean of any officers who had prior disciplinary proceedings on their record. It's part of the deal. So the city says, okay, well, we need the union and we need the cops. And if they're going to walk away over this thing, then we're going to agree to those terms. And that results in less accountability and less transparency. So I have a huge problem with the police unions. I think that they are very problematic. I think they cover up for a lot of bad cops. And unfortunately, they have a lot of political power because they employ all of these cops. So until there is some reform there, I think that a lot of these problems are going to continue to linger and linger on. Yeah, so R&R Law Group, another one from Auditing Audit. I really appreciate this, but I would like to thumbs up Gigi's comment of why are all cops not required to have body cams on? So that's just local policy. Just local police policy, local city council policy. The best way to get your police to keep their cameras on and mandate that they're on is to pass laws in your local municipalities. Unless there's some national mandate. So in other words, if Congress passed the federal Congress, U.S. Congress for the entire United States can't come into your city and say, we're going to mandate that every single police officer everywhere wears body cameras. We're not going to see that because they don't have that power. We have federalism, we have the federal government and the state governments. And so what the federal government could do though is say, look, we're going to give Arizona, your state, for example, we're going to give you $5 million a year. As long as you're a part of this body camera program that we're offering. If you're a part of this program, then we're going to give you $5 million. Oh, what's part of the program? Well, it's contingent upon you making sure that every single officer always has body cameras on and they can't turn them off, and all of that is part of our public database program. Okay, that sounds great. Our officers will comply with that. Then you have this contract between the state localities and the federal government. So you could also put pressure on your congresspeople, your senators and your congresspeople to actually, move forward towards some national criminal justice reform. But I think you'll have a lot more effectiveness just communicating with your localities. All right, David Del Pozo says asked a question I really would like some more info on. Don't know if you could help. So if I missed it, I apologize. There is a link you can send questions to. Send them to tips@rrlawaz.com, and I try to get back to everybody on those. Could the POTUS governor, as chief of the executive branch, force police to have body cameras on at all times? So the president could do it with the executive branch, right? So Donald Trump could come through and just, issue an executive order that said everybody under his jurisdiction is now going to be mandated to have these body cameras on. I think the governor could theoretically do that also. You'd have to look into your local state constitutions and the different powers, and that would be an interesting question. I'd be very curious to see. But traditionally, it's your city councils that are governing the police. So like the city of Scottsdale, the city of Phoenix, the city of Mesa, they're the ones that negotiate with all these people. So talk to your mayor, talk to your local city council, and make your voice known that you want these body cameras on. All right. Well, listen, everybody, it's about that time. That means I got to get rocking and rolling. I want to thank you so much for being here. As a reminder, if you've not already done so, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, and we would love it if you shared this show with anybody else who you think would be a great part of the conversation. Chats are pretty lively. These conversations are lively. We're going to be sort of modifying our channel and doing a little bit deeper dives onto some of these specific cases, and we are following them along. So all of these cases are going onto our calendar, our high-profile cases calendar, and we're just going to check in with the docket and continue to follow these things along. So we want to make sure that they're a part of the conversation with us and that they are subscribed. Before I hop off, also, if you know anybody you know or love who's been specifically charged with a crime in the state of Arizona, that's what we do. That's what our office does. We have an awesome team of people here who want to help good people facing criminal charges get back on their feet, reintegrate into society, become good citizens, and live their lives. That's really what we want to help them do. So we would love your referral. Really appreciate it. Want to thank you once again so much for being here. We will be back here tomorrow at the same time. So it's 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Until then, have a wonderful evening.